Hey guys, it's Mark Flockhart. Just giving you another insurance tip here, straight from my new website, which is insuring.com, which I'll link down here as well. If you want to learn more, if you want to get articles of things that I've written or different tips on different specifics, feel free to check out that website. It's completely free. Teenage drivers. So I want to go over what you need to know, what tips I'm going to have for a different discount to different companies that you can go with when you do have a teenage driver. So if you want to read the article about it and get a little bit more details, this is going to be under, it's called A Parent's Guide to Insurance for Teen Drivers. So this is pretty simple. You have a 15-year-old that is starting to drive. Typically there's a few situations where you're younger and you're 13, I believe, sometimes 14. You don't necessarily get a license, but you can if you're in, let's say, Iowa. Not to single you out, but if you're driving on property for work or a farm or anything like that, you can get a license earlier. Most systems, or all the ones I know, don't specifically allow you to add a driver that's 13 or 14 years old. So you can get like a specific business policy or a farm policy, which is cheap, have a younger driver that can drive in specific situations. So if they're driving from one land to another, or they're driving for work, then they can do that as well on the property. They can drive into town if they need to, but that's not typically, unless it's for farm use, then you can't use that. That aside, what you have is, in most situations, once your daughter or son turns 15 years old, they have to be listed on your insurance. I know that doesn't make sense because they don't have a license yet, they just have a permit. So what I mean by that is you need to let the insurance company know ahead of time that they have a permit. They're ready to drive, they have a year to go, so to speak, and they once they turn 16, then they're going to go on to your insurance. Now that might be a little bit scary, and yes, if you want to not tell your insurance that you have a 15-year-old, that's fine as well, although it doesn't typically cost you anything to let them know that you have a 15-year-old. So once you have a 15-year-old that has a permit, call your insurance up. I almost guarantee that they will not charge you additional for that driver. However, once they turn 16 and they do, assuming that they do get their license, now you've got to pay. I know you're freaking out. Crap, what do I do? So it is expensive. There's no doubt about that. No one would be searching this video if it wasn't an issue. The problem that you're going to run into is a 16-year-old, there's not a given price, because the people you're watching this video might be in California or Michigan or New Jersey or wherever you're from. Every price is different, and it all depends on how good of a driver you have, how good of a history that you personally have, your credit, all that stuff makes a difference. If you want to learn more about the discounts, click there as well. If you want to learn more about the different things that affect insurance, there's a video as well. We've got a 16-year-old, soon to be 16-year-old driver. What do I need to prepare for this? The number one thing that you need to do is you need to call your insurance and ask them the scenario. I have a 16-year-old, or pretend I have a 16-year-old. I want to see what kind of effects that's going to have onto my personal insurance. What cost is that going to benefit, or is that going to cost me? What they're going to do is they're going to run a scenario. Some companies have websites that give you as if examples or per se, and so you can plug in pretend information and it won't affect you at all. So you can say, this is the situation I'm in, this is what I'm looking at, and it'll say, here's a range that you're going to be in. If you want to be more specific, what I personally would do is I would call your agent, call your insurance, and say, look, I've got my son, he's 15 years old, he just got his permit, I want to add him on as a permitted driver. Will that cost anything? If no, great, put him on. Now, I want to also know how much it's going to cost me when he does start to drive. So how much is it going to be? They are going to bulk a little bit because they don't want to scare you. It is going to scare you a little bit. I mean, the average that I see, if you are only $80 extra a month, so what, $480 every 6 months, it's a good chunk of change, but that's good. Okay, if you're 100, 150, I've seen is $200 a month to add a driver. That's a little out there, so it's time to shop if that's the case. If they refuse, say, no, we can't do it, not until they turn 16, that's common. Don't be, be prepared for that, because they don't want to scare you. They don't want you looking for other insurance. They don't want to lose you as a customer. What you're going to do is you're going to say, well, just give me a pretend. I know you can't tell me what 6 months from now is the rate is, because it could change. The rate could change. And I know you can't tell me if you're with like Liberty Mutual. You can't tell me what a year from now is going to be. Very few companies lock you in for more than a year. The situation that you have is they're not going to want to go over that. I would tell them flat out, say, look, I need to get an idea what we're looking at. Is there any way you can do it? If they say no, then say, okay, well then let's just pretend that my son has a license today. Let's just move his birthday back 1 year. We'll say that he's 16 years old. How much would it cost me today, assuming that my son could drive? If they still won't do it, then they flat out do not have your best interest at mind, and it's time to look for another insurance company. I hate to say it, but there are going to be a few companies that don't want to quote that. And I get it. You know, I get that part. If I was the agent, I wouldn't want to tell you either. I just want you to be just shocked and surprised, and then like, you know what? I don't have a choice. I'm going to stay with you as well. Those that are prepared, they should be there to help you and guide you through that and explain, here's why, here's different discounts that we can apply to your policy to get that price back down. So find that out. If the price is ridiculous, it's going to happen. There's going to be a few of you out there that get these crazy prices. Don't freak out. Just understand that you have options. Some tips for when you do add them on as a driver. So let's pretend that in this scenario, they are 16, they have a license. They just got licensed yesterday. Don't put them on your Corvette, okay? Don't put them on the Hummer. Don't put them on as the driver of anything but something, the least expensive vehicle, the least risky vehicle. Because you got to imagine, any driver that's below the age of 25 is considered a high risk. Their risk is so much greater up here because they don't have what we call driving history, driving experience. They haven't been driving. Even when you're age 24, if you're under that 25 range, it's going to hurt you. If you were age 30, but you've never gotten a license, it's going to hurt you because you now only have 1 year driving history, 2 years driving history, whatever you've been driving, that's going to affect your insurance. Now, that person that's 30 isn't going to be hit as hard because they've got more of a maturity level. They are more responsible, so to speak. Not that they always are, but that's just the way insurance looks at it. And so they're not going to be as high of a risk because they've passed that 25 range, but they're still high risk because they haven't had a lot of driving history. Most companies don't care about the driving age. Some talk about it. Some don't even ask you, even though they count them. They don't even say it. They just automatically put you at 16, which is fine. In this scenario, they're 16 years old. They start driving. They're going on your insurance. Make sure that if they're getting good grades, most companies will give you a discount for having good student. It's called the good student discount. It's an average of a B or better, or it's known as a 3.0 or better on their last grade report. Now keep in mind, if you add this on, they are going to ask you for a copy of their transcript. So be prepared to give that to them. If they took driver's education, that's going to help as well. If they took a road test, so they've taken what's called a defensive driving course, that will typically give you a discount for the next 3 years. You don't necessarily even have to be a student to take that, or an underage driver. You can be 55 years old or 52 years old and take that defensive driving course. In some states don't offer it, but in most states, and that'll give you a discount on your insurance for the next 3 years, and then you can retake it, and then 3 years of another discount. So that's a great thing to do. If your child is a student, or let's say they're in college, right, and they're away from the home, if they're more than 100 miles, typically there's a away at school discount. That's another thing that may help. There are some specific companies that focus on teenage drivers, very few, but there are a couple out there that actually give you a discount for the fact that you added a teenage driver. It's still going to cost more than you're used to, but some will help you impact that a lot less than what you're expecting. In the scenario that you're just not prepared to pay the extra cost and you know your son or daughter is not going to drive very often, you do have the option in most companies to exclude them. So you can say to your current insurance, say, look, I know they're 16, I want to exclude them, they won't drive my car. Be very careful in that situation. You have to know that that's exactly what it means, exclude. So if they drive your car, which typically is still fine, even though you're excluding them, but if they cause an accident, nothing's covered. No bodily injury, no medical, no property damage, your car's not covered if you have full coverage. They will turn around and flat out and turn their heads and say, we never saw it, it's your problem. So keep that in mind. If you do exclude them, that is an option when money is really tight and you just have to keep them off the policy. But in that scenario, most people don't want that. A lot of companies are very picky nowadays because of a lot of the insurance claims that are happening with younger drivers or unknown drivers, so to speak. So if you typically have someone else in the house, but you forgot to tell your insurance and they drive your car and cause an accident, that's someone who should have been rated. Well, let's say your son or daughter gets their own insurance. There is a good and a bad to that too. So the positive is they're going to build their own insurance credit. Although it doesn't really matter. We say credit. There's no credit. It's just they're going to build a history with the company they're with. Once they've been with them for 6 months, that'll help. A year, 2 years. The longer they are, the better they are. Then they'll hit 25. They'll think they got some awesome discount by switching, and then they're going to get that discount because they're not a risk anymore. The positive to doing that is if they cause an accident, if you have a decent income or a lot of assets to protect, and your daughter or son causes an accident, if they have their own insurance, then they're not typically going to come after you. They're going to look at their insurance. I want to be a little bit careful with the way I say that, is because that's not to stop them. They can still sue you. Because you are their legal guardian, you're still responsible for your son or daughter. Just kind of closing an eye and pretending like they got the right insurance, even though you know they didn't, or you thought they did and they didn't, that doesn't necessarily negate you from the fact that other people can come after you. The biggest thing that you need to tell your teenage driver, do not get a ticket. Do not get in an accident. You can't control it. I know it happens, but if it does, you get a ticket, that price that we're hoping to be $80 a month, $100 a month, will double. Because now you're a high-risk driver, you got a ticket or an accident that was their fault, the price will go through the roof. Okay, so be very careful with that. Some companies, if you want to keep your child separate, you can get them on what's called a non-owner's policy. So some companies will allow them to purchase liability insurance when they don't have a vehicle. That will probably be more expensive than if you just combine everybody under one roof. Typically, because if you're mom or dad, you're going to have a specific rating. You're going to be a good driver, so to speak. Let's pretend that you have the perfect driving record, right? You got good credit, you're a good driver, you own your home, you're married, you've got all these discounts. And then you add a driver. That is going to be way cheaper than if you have daughter or son or daughter on their own policy with low coverages and you keeping your own. So just keep that in mind. You can get them on separate policies, but typically it's not the best route for you. So I'm sure you want to know what companies are best for you. I can't tell you specifically because I don't know what state you're in, but feel free to ask me, okay? Let me know, because I'm licensed in most states. I'm not here to sell you guys insurance. This is just more a channel. This is my goal of me helping give back to people. I want to give you the advice that can help you make a better decision. But if you want to know, I will recommend specific companies. Just leave me a comment below. Let me know what city or what state that you're in, and then I'll try to give you a couple different options to go through. I hope this was helpful, guys. If you have advice, if you've gone through this, if you've noticed, if you're going through this, let me know in the comments below. What have you found that has worked or hasn't worked? If you want to know more specifics about a specific company, or if you're looking for a better company than you're currently with, leave me a comment below. Let me know what state you're in, and I'll recommend a couple different companies that I would call. If you want to know more about insurance directly, if you have a specific question, leave me a comment below there as well, and maybe you'll be responsible for my next video. Good luck, guys. I know it's tough. Grit your teeth and get through it. If you got to call a couple of companies, definitely make some right decisions. Do some research online. Check out my website if you want to learn more tips in different companies that I recommend. It's insuringhints.com. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe. That was my effect for a subscribe button. Pretend I made one because I have no clue how to do this with visual graphics. I know how to do insurance.